Okay, so demo for today is going to be an introduction to coil building, which I know a number of you have been able to practice on your days in the classroom. But I want to give everybody kind of just a little bit of a introduction to the way that I do coil building and explain some things about the way that I do it versus the video that the alternate video that someone else made that I found on YouTube. That's actually a really good video, but I want you guys to know the difference between the way that I do it and why. So for coil building, obviously we're going to build just like a little cylinder cup sort of idea to begin with. And the first thing that we'll need, well, firstly you'll need to make sure that you have all of your things. If you have a brush, that's great. If not, a sponge will work just fine. You will need your needle tool or some other sort of sharp implement that you can cut clay with. You'll need a fork and or a spoon and a butter knife. Now, oh, and some water, obviously. So what you're gonna do is rip off probably half of what you would use to make a pinch pot. You know, we were talking about for a pinch pot, the max size you would probably want to use is something around the size of your fist. So half of that, smaller, a little bigger, it's not crucial, but that's going to be your bottom. And the way that you'll make your bottom is by rolling it into a ball. And it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to kind of you want to shoot for trying to get rid of all these little types of cracks. And get it close to a ball, and then you're gonna make kind of like a patty, like a hamburger patty kind of situation out of it, and you're shooting to try to make it, you know, circular. So once you have a circle, you can start thinking about building up the walls, and to prepare for doing that with this, you're gonna take your fork and score all the way around the edge like this. Nice and aggressively, and then you can put some water on those score marks. And then set it to the side for the time being. You're gonna then rip off another piece of clay, and you're going to make this one into what we refer to as a coil. Now, making the coils is probably the most challenging part of this whole process, because you want for them to be, you know, about as bigger around as your pinky, about a ½ inch thick. So if you've got a super tiny little finger, you know, maybe try and think in terms of a ½ inch thick. But for most people, you know, a pinky is gonna be about a ½ inch thick. So just think in terms of that. So the way you make a coil is you kind of get it started manually, just kind of squeezing, turning in your hand, and then you're going to start the rolling process. So you want to kind of have enough space, and you're going to do this on your board, and you don't really need to make coils that are longer than your board. They become sort of difficult to manage if they're wider than that or longer than the board is wide. So once you have it kind of begun like this, you're going to just lightly roll. And what inevitably happens for a lot of people is that you have these, it starts to flatten slightly. And you can see it's wider here than it is this way. So what I'm gonna do is identify where that is and just kind of tap it so it's more even. And then I'm going to just continue rolling it, and you can see I'm rolling from the the heel of my hand all the way to my fingertips, and I'm constantly moving back and forth and around on the coil. And what I'm shooting for is having it the same exact thickness all the way down the length of it. You want for it to be the same. And you also want for, you know, it to be about the thickness of your pinky. So once you've got your coil roll, this is about as long as I'm going to make this one, then you can start thinking about adding it to your bottom here. And the way that I'm going to start to do that is on both ends of my coil, I'm going to pinch it into kind of a wedge shape, like this, on both ends. And then I'm going to score one side of it. So I'll take my, you can do this with the needle tool as well, it just takes a little longer. But if you've got a fork, it really does make things go a little quicker. You can see that I'm being really aggressive with the scoring. You know, really nice, deep, aggressive score marks. And then I'm going to wet the coil all up and down its length. So at this point, I've got my coil tapered, score marks with water, and I'm gonna begin applying it to the bottom. And the way that I do that is usually I will hold with my left hand, because I'm right-handed, I'm gonna hold it vertical with my left hand, so you can't see this, but my left hand is holding this up and it's just hanging. So the part that's hanging, that's what I'll apply to the slab here. And the way I'll do it, I'll start in one spot and I'm gonna press to get it started. And as I apply it, I'm pressing it in. Not enough to like smash it flat, but just enough to kind of get it to squeeze out the excess water in the score marks and stick. So now we're getting to the point where this coil is going to start to double over on itself, and you can kind of see why I've put this taper on the end of the coil like this, because it's going to make a nice gradual transition from the bottom of the piece, the slab, to the coil, and I'm going to start building up on the coil onto itself. So I will continue, oh no, I will continue to just turn it and press it into place, and I don't want to leave any gaps in between the coil layers. And my end broke off here, so I'm gonna recreate that transition spot here, and I've got a little crack developed here, and that's not gonna be a problem at all. Set this to the side. I'm gonna make one more coil, make you guys watch me put one more on, and then we're gonna clean up the interior and the exterior with the fork and the butter knife. So when I'm rolling these out, I'm constantly looking for thick spots, because I don't want to press on a particularly thin spot, and because I want the whole thing to have a uniform thickness. So I'm looking for thin or thick spots to roll out, and this is pretty even. It's even enough. So I'm gonna redo my taper on each end, score the whole thing. Water. And take this taper and I'm going to layer it on top of the other one. So I have a nice flat transition, and then I will continue to add this coil. And my goal here is to build this straight up. And so I am just trying to put the coil directly on top of the one underneath it that's it's joining to. So it builds straight up. Now, these can build pretty quickly. And what you want to be careful of is building too high too quickly, because it's soft clay, and I could easily build this in the next 15 minutes up to be too tall for this to even be able to sustain its own weight. So it's important, no matter what you're building out of coils, to keep in mind that the clay is soft, and you may have to build some, wait, allow it to stiffen slightly over a half hour, 45 minutes, come back to it, and then continue building. Now, the only thing if you're gonna do that, which inevitably all of you will have to take those types of steps and make those types of decisions, if you're going to do that, you need to make sure that you keep the edge where you're gonna join the next coil on top, you need to keep that wet. So if you have to take your bag and kind of place it over the rim just to keep it moist, you can do that. So at this point, what I want to try to describe to you guys is how to smooth the coils together. Now, not all of the clay all the coil projects that we're going to do will have smooth sides. Some of them we're going to try to leave some of the coil look to them on the outside, but for right now, what we're going to do is try to smooth the coils together to make a solid wall of clay, because that is the most structurally sound way to finish these off. And the way that I do it is I take my left hand, my non-dominant hand, and I reach inside to support this wall, and then I'm going to take my fork and I'm going to just gradually but thoroughly and aggressively blend sections of the coils together. Now, I am not doing this. I'm really trying to get the coils to blend together like this. And if you feel more comfortable at the top kind of going down with it, you're more than welcome to do that. All you're concerned with is getting it to blend together. I'm not going to go all the way around and make you watch me do that, but once you've got enough of it blended together with all these nice score marks, you're then going to take a flat edge, and I like to tell folks that, you know, if you're at home and you don't have the types of stuff we have in the studio, like fancy clay tools, you can use this butter knife, and in essence, all you're going to do is you have to support it from the inside, just like you did when you were scoring it, and you're going to kind of like you're frosting a cake. And your aim is to smooth out the coil marks, or the score marks, so that you've got a nice smooth side. And it should look something like this. Okay, obviously this is not perfect, but you want to do the smoothing every 4 or 5 layers. I actually went a little taller than I normally like to with the number of layers I've got. So then for the inside, you do the exact same thing. You get in there with your fork, blend them together, and then you can go in with your butter knife and blend your score marks together. And we're going to practice doing this today, and build up, 5 or 6 inches, and then cover it, because we're going to continue working on it tomorrow. So Best of luck to you with this, and I'll talk to you soon.